All right, let's talk about chips. You know, the Android operating system is undoubtedly the single most disruptive force in computing in the last 20 years. Whether you're a large company in any industry or a small startup trying to build any new gadget, the Android operating system is the most accessible and the most capable operating system you can get your hands on. It's open source. No wonder the computing revolution in China took off on the backs of the Android operating system and is now the fastest growing mobile computing market in the world. Android started out in the phone industry, completely disrupted the phone market. Then it worked its way into tablets. But that's not where it's going to end. Because it's an operating system that's free to all. Because it's an operating system that allows every company, every country, every industry to freely innovate. And because it is a virtually complete operating system, by virtue of the fact that so many of us make contributions to it. There are more engineers working on Android. There are more engineers working around the world in the Android ecosystem than any ecosystem today. And so it stands to reason that the positive feedback system is going to fuel its disruption. At this point, it's kind of hard to imagine stopping it. But it's wonderful for the world. When we think about building Tegra, our mobile processor, we think about what we can do to take the Android operating system, in combination, take it into new markets. Markets where our expertise can especially serve. Markets where visual computing matters. We started out by building the Tegra 2, the world's first dual-core processor. At the time, people asked us, why would you need a dual-core processor? Then we took that to Tegra 3, the world's first quad-core processor. People asked us why we needed a quad-core processor. And it's all very clear now that in a mobile environment, in a mobile context, there are more and more activities that are happening simultaneously. So the question is, where do we go from here? Now, there's some new industries that I think Android will continue to advance into and make a contribution to. One of them, of course, is television. That one's a foregone conclusion. It's not if, it's simply when. 4K televisions are coming, smart televisions are coming. It stands to reason that Android is going to be a very important factor in that. Consoles. We happen to believe that the Android operating system is going to be the most important platform for game consoles in the future. And the reason for that is because you have all of your digital asset in Android. Why wouldn't you want to be home, connected to television, and then have access to all of your photographs or all of your music, of all of your movies, and all of your video games? It's simply a matter of time. It's simply a matter of time before Android also disrupts the video game console industry. It is the reason why we built Shield, so that we can engage it and start to make a contribution to it. We also believe that Android would make a difference in the car industry. The car industry is one of the most exciting industries in the world for many of us because we love cars, but there's a second reason. We happen to believe that the car will be your most important mobile computer. It is likely to be our most personal robot someday. It is already our most expensive consumer electronics owning, and it stands to reason that it's also going to be the most advanced. Now, it happens to have some of the most pioneering minds and some of the brightest engineers working in that industry, because they also love cars. And so I think this is an area that's going to make huge contributions, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. And so the question then, after Tegra 2, the world's first dual core, after Tegra 3, the world's first quad core, and then we double the performance of that with Tegra 4, what's next for us? What's next for us? I mean, what could we possibly do? I guess we could do 8 cores, but that seems pretty pedestrian. That seems pretty obvious. We could do 12 cores, that's more than 8. However, I think that maybe we could do better than that. What we decided to do was we decided to make Tegra K1 the world's first 192 core processor. A 192 CUDA cores, all programmable by programs, all fully programmable, all massively parallel. And this is the first GPU. The reason why we decided to call it Tegra K1 is because this is the first GPU that took a vast jump from the previous generation. It's almost inappropriate to call it Tegra 5 because it's simply not linear. We decided to call it Tegra K1. We decided to call it Tegra K1 because it's based on the Kepler architecture. As many of you know, Kepler is the most successful GPU architecture that we have ever created, and it's the most important GPU architecture the industry had ever known. This architecture, because it is so energy efficient, has made it possible, and so programmable, has made it possible for us to extend the GPU from not just desktop computers to workstations, but all the way into the cloud with Grid and into supercomputers with Tesla. One singular architecture, all compatible, is now able to span computing from a few watts all the way to megawatts, from 192 cores all the way to 36 million cores running our nation's fastest supercomputer, all based on the exact same architecture called Kepler. So we're really, really excited today that with Tegra, we've bridged the gap. We've brought mobile computing to the same level as desktop computing. We've brought mobile computing to the same level as supercomputing. We've brought the heart of GeForce and the soul of Tesla to the Tegra family. We've brought the heart of GeForce and the soul of Tesla to mobile computing, and we're really excited about that. Now, what's the benefit? What's the benefit of that? Well, the first benefit is solving, in fact, a very significant problem for game developers. If you take a look at game development today, just as you saw with Batman, the production value is incredible. It's completely cinematic. It's cinematic and also interactive at the same time. The computer graphics is cinematic. The experience is cinematic. The story has to be sufficiently broad and large and large in scope that you can actually enjoy the video game for 8 hours at a time, 10 hours at a time, 20 hours at a time. So there's enormous depth to the video games. And it stands to reason, with so much artistic contribution and so much technical contribution, that the production value, the production cost would be so high. In fact, most AAA titles today cost more than $100 million. Now, there's only one thing that you can do to solve that problem. You could either reduce the production value, or you have to have a larger footprint. You have to find a way, as a game developer, to reach more users. Well, in order to reach more users, unfortunately, the architectures are radically different. When you take a look at each one of the game platforms, the architectures historically were very different. They're becoming more and more similar. However, the architecture of mobile devices, which is the largest computing platform in the world today, and the architecture of next-generation game consoles are radically different. One of them is based on OpenGL ES 3.0, and the other one is based on OpenGL 4.3. The capabilities are radically different. The capabilities, the features. And so, for a game developer, the diversity of the platforms creates another degree of complexity that is simply intolerable. The developer's dilemma. They want to build great games, they want to take the financial risk, but they need to have large enough footprint that can accept and help people enjoy the creation that they make. And so today, we're incredibly excited to announce that Epic Games is going to bring their next generation engine, the Unreal Engine 4, to the Tegra K1. And Tim is a man of few words, for all of you guys who know Tim. And he has the highest expectations. We've been working with Tim now for 20 years. He has the highest expectations of anybody in the game industry. And he sets us so cleanly. He says we can take absolutely anything that runs on PC or high-end console and run it on Tegra now. I didn't think that we'd be at this level on mobile for another 3 to 4 years. Now let's take a look at what he meant by that. So if you look at this, this is Unreal Engine 3. This is the last generation game console. In the year 2002, we launched MV30, which was GeForce effects, with the invention of DX9. DX9 brought to the world programmable shading. And the effect that we saw in video games were per pixel lighting. So video games became bumpy and shiny. Okay, whereas before it looked chalky and flat, now it looks bumpy and shiny. It came to life. And modern video games are still based on DX9. It wasn't for several years later that Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 brought DX9 to game consoles. And then many years after that, it came to mobile devices. For the very first time with Unreal Engine 3, with Infinity Blade from Epic running on an iPad. iPad was the first capable machine to be able to run an engine that was introduced in the year 2002. A span of 8 years' time. A span of 8 years' time that it took for the Unreal 3 engine that runs on Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 to finally be able to run on a mobile device. Well, that entire 8 years is what we consider last generation. It was the DX9 era. The DX9 era. If you take a look at most video games today, with the exception of some of the more modern video games that we're showing you, when you take a look at a mobile device or you look at a video game today, it's mostly DX9. That's the look of DX9. Well, here is the beginning of next generation. Next generation started with DX 11.1. I'll show you what DX 11.1 can do in just a second. We introduced it with Kepler. 1 year later, because of this incredible imperative to unify the platforms for the video game industry, the new game consoles are effectively PCs. It's architecturally identical to a PC. It's because of this incredible imperative to keep the platforms the same. 1 year later, the game console industry brought the same architecture to game consoles. As a result, now the game developers have a reasonable footprint to target with next generation DX11 games running Unreal Engine 4. But here's the really exciting thing for Tim. And what he said earlier is this. This time around, because of what we've done with Tegra K1, we have now reduced the amount of time that it's taken for next generation platforms to be able to reach not just PCs, not just consoles, but also mobile devices of all kinds. The benefits to game developers is really immense. Literally one singular architecture, one singular platform, and more importantly, one engine. Now the Unreal Engine, many of you guys have known, have been tracking the video game industry, is the most successful game engine of all time. Unreal Engine is effectively the operating system of games. The game AI, the game physics, the game rendering engine, it basically embodies the runtime of modern video games. Unreal Engine 3 had hundreds of games that were credited to it. And here comes Unreal Engine 4, the next generation. So that's what Tim is really excited about. Now, when you take a look at Unreal Engine 3 and you compare that to Unreal Engine 4, it's really incomparable. Because Unreal Engine 4 is all about being photoreal. This relentless pursuit for photorealism. Several factors, several characteristics make the next generation game content look so distinguished relative to the previous generation. The first thing that you'll see is that all of the rendering is physically based, meaning that we're capturing the microstructures of the materials and how it responds to light physics. And so as a result, you could almost feel the material physics, the material properties of everything in the scene. The second thing is the advanced lighting systems. It's no longer just the unidirectional light. Light is coming from all over. It's as close to global illumination as we've ever come in real time. It also includes physics simulations so that the world comes to life. And to make it all possible requires this new technology called multiple render targets, really rendering simultaneously into a whole lot of different buffers at the same time, and then doing screen space computations to resolve the final scene. The result is a photorealistic and a stunning looking image. Next generation gaming is really going to be a big deal. This is the kind of imagery we like to create on Tegra. And so let's show you what that means. Now, very few people, very few computer graphics company would ever lead with a human face as a demonstration. And the reason for that is because the human face is so hard. We know what a human face looks like. Now, if I were to put a monster up here, everybody would say, wow, that's a good-looking monster, and because we've never seen a monster before. So long as it's bright and shiny, it looks really upset, I think everybody would be rather satisfied by it. Well, this particular face is being rendered in real time, and it's not a photograph. Lucas, let's show them what Ari can do. Now, let me explain some of the technology behind it. So first of all, in order to capture the human face, our skin is a living thing. Light penetrates through our outer layers, goes into the skin, bounces around inside, and then scatters, and then comes out, picking up some of the tone of the color of your blood. And as a result, when you look at them, it looks alive. Of course, there's a lot of pores. Your eyes are the windows to the soul, and so obviously the eyes have to look alive. In this particular case, we use a technology called ray tracing to ray trace the eyes. That's why the eye crystal looks like it's alive. And of course, all of the shadows are being rendered so beautifully. You see no triangles, no faceting whatsoever. Triangles have disappeared. The lighting system is so sophisticated we can pick up the little sheen of the oil of his face. Now let's change, I love the soft shadows underneath the lips. I mean, it's so exquisitely rendered. Photorealistic. Okay, let's Lucas, walk us through some of this stuff. You do some talking here. Let me spare a few seconds.
Sure, so yeah, this is Digital Ira, and it's a data set from our friends at USC. And if you guys have been watching previous time, we've actually seen that we've shown it on a GTX Titan, the same data set. So it's pretty cool this works on a K1. Yeah, and as Jensen said, there's subsurface scattering in the light going through the ears, also the light from as the shadow lands behind his nose. You can see if you turn it off, you can just see that like his skin just kind of looks like plaster or something. It doesn't have the right effect, and so that's something that's it's quite computationally expensive, and something that using Tegra K1 is possible on mobile finally.
Now change the lighting environment. This isn't just lighting, this is image-based lighting. And look how the light is coming shining through his ears.
Yeah.
You get some rim lighting off the edge of his head. And let's change the lighting yet again. That's just really stunning. If he was just more attractive, I could sit here and look at him all night. Okay, so this is a face only a mother or a computer graphics company could love. Ira is actually his real name. He's a very good friend, and I apologize for that funny comment. Okay, so, but show us now what it's like if we didn't have all of the photoreal capabilities that that Tegra K1 offers.
Sure.
So this is what a face would look like using today's computer graphics. And notice it's a convincing head. I mean, when you look at it, you go, that's a head. There's no question that's human, but there's no question also it's computer graphics. And this is basically OpenGL ES 3.0. Okay? All right, that's fantastic. Let's show them something else. Let's show them something else. All right, so this is, we want to do something that is a big world, and this is something that Lucas did. Lucas, why don't you talk us through it, and I'll ask you some questions along the way.
Sure. So yeah, it's a big superstructure actually, as opposed to just a head, and it has a lot of interesting features that are cool. We have pretty rich metallic materials. We have HDR lighting and tone mapping, cinematic effects like lens flares, bloom.
Now show them what global illumination and HDR means.
Sure.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
So do you guys know what HDR means? High dynamic range. Your eyes could see much, much larger dynamic range than a computer monitor's 16 bits per pixel can render. Okay? And so the way that we solve this problem, is we render to a much larger dynamic range inside the graphics processor. Okay? Then we do essentially a tone map, a histogram of all of the tones in the scene. And we figure out where the tones are, and we remap that tone into a smaller color space. And as a result, we retain the large distributions of the large contrasts. The deep darks and the bright whites are retained, but we remap, if you will, the rest of the dynamic range to fit back into that of a computer monitor.
Yeah, and you can see that as you go down. So like behind this building, as you see that it's pretty dark, right? But then as you zoom in and you cover up, the sky, which is very bright, you start to see more detail that's in the previous dark area, like when your eyes adapt, to the brightness of the scene. But then as you go up and you expose more of the sun, you'll see that it also, it adjusts to allow you to see the sky, which, relative to the back of the building is very bright. Yeah.
Did you show us what global illumination and HDR turned off would look like?
Yeah, definitely. So sort of rendering this with what it looks like using OpenGL ES 3.
So this looks like a computer graphics game today?
Yeah, I mean...
Right?
Yeah.
Not with this many geometry. I mean, this is still rich with polygons, but without global illumination, without high dynamic range, this is what your games would look like. And let's turn it back on. It's almost unbearable to watch.